Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Leroy and Stitch, featuring the voices of David Chase, Chris Saunders, David Ogden Steers, Kevin McDonald, Tia Carrere, Kevin Michael Richardson, Rob Paulson, Jeff Bennett, and Zoe Caldwell, directed by Tony Craig and Bob's Gunaway. Now, I'm on the last movie that I have not yet seen, and let's just get straight into this review. We start in space in Planet Turo, where Lilo, Stitch, Pleakley, and Jumba get awarded by the Grand Councilwoman for capturing the 625 experiments and made them good things as Jumba gets his laboratory back. Pleakley becomes a teacher and Stitch is promoted captain and earns his own ship, and Lilo will remain on Earth to check up on the experiments, while Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley doesn't want to come back to Earth. And Lilo is worried for her Ohana, and they get back to Hawaii, and this feels familiar but not in a good way. As Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley get back to Hawaii thanks to Lilo, but they believe they don't belong there. Meanwhile, Gantu is stuck in Hawaii with experiment 625, as Gantu wants to break Dr. Hamsterville out of prison so he can redeem himself. And once again, Gantu feels useless while he has a dumb arc to begin with after the first movie, as the characters are pretty not great. Lilo is depressed for most of the movie, while Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley want to go back to space because Lilo is letting them go for what reason? Because the aliens want to go back home, as Lilo gives Jumba a Elvis Presley record, Pleakley a rock, and Stitch a necklace Lilo kept in her socks for 3 years, as that's gotta be stinky, and that is a problem with that line. And the dialogue is problematic while Gantu breaks Dr. Hamsterville out of prison while he's still treating him rather horribly, and Stitch has a mission as a captain to capture Gantu and Dr. Hamsterville, and crawls like a bug would and plays around with the lights and takes off by hyperspace while Pleakley learns he's a supervising teacher. And the animation is like a typical video sequel, as it doesn't look good. Jumbo gets back to his laboratory, going back to being an evil genius, and Lilo checks on the experiments to see if they're living a happy life in Hawaii, and they pretty much do, as Myrtle and her friends confront Lilo and act as annoying as they typically do, while Lilo misses Stitch too much, like she wants to call him, as Jumbo's laboratory is broken in by Gantu and Dr. Hamsterville, while Jumbo hears Elvis music, and luckily they didn't make it as obnoxious as they did in the last couple of movies. And Pleakley feels like a failure, and he doesn't give lectures like he was promised, and Stitch sleeps on the captain's bed, and they miss Lilo on Earth, and Earth had a little too much. But anyways, Dr. Hamsterville wants Jumbo to create a new experiment like the good old days, and the doctor cheated Jumbo for the past 25 years, and Gantu comes in and points the gun at Jumbo, and he makes an experiment called like 626 called Leroy, while Jumbo gets a call from Pleakley and have a pleasant conversation until Hamsterville tells Jumbo to hang up and says some stuff they don't mean, and Leroy gets born. And do I like Leroy? Not as an experiment, and that character is preposterous as a villain. Stitch barges in and fights Leroy, and he's just as strong as Stitch, and the fight between Leroy and Stitch was not very good either until Stitch gets trapped thanks to Pleakley coming in, and they both get trapped with Jumba, as Hamsterville creates an army full of Leroys and sends Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley to the black hole, where they'll disappear forever. And wasn't there a Disney movie called The Black Hole many years ago? As Leroy, Hamsterville, and Gantu take over the ship, while Lilo wants to call Stitch and goes to a ship where she finds 625 and talks with him, and Lilo gives 625 a name and calls him Reuben, and asks him to find a way to call Stitch, and this is harmless for kids, but unfortunately it's not good for me as an adult. Lilo calls Stitch in space, and Stitch picks up and acts differently, and Lilo sees the look alike is in Stitch, as Hamsterville creates Leroy, and his henchman becomes Leroy, but not Gantu. but which is a complete betrayal of how menacing Gantu was in the first movie, as Lilo learns Reuben is like Stitch, where they build a way to go space, while Leroy lands on Earth and Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley gets closer to the black hole, and the writing in this is too obvious for my taste. While Leroy terrorizes Hawaii with his presence as he looks for the experiments on a checklist and brings them to the army of Leroy's, including Myrtle's dog Gigi, as Lilo gets to space with Reuben and lands on Stitch's ship that's taken overboard by Hamsterville, and Gantu take over the Grand Councilwoman's ship, and the Grand Councilwoman has been demoted, and the acting in this is pretty bad. Hamsterville gets worse and worse as he puts Lilo and Reuben in prison and fires Gantu with no shame whatsoever, as Gantu puts Lilo and Reuben in prison at first, but Gantu decides to let them out, and he joins the good side, which feels like a total cliche, as they almost get encountered by quite a few of Leroy's, as Stitch crashes the ship and gets them to them as they take the ship to Earth to save the experiments, while Leroy and Hamsterville almost killed the other experiments, while Myrtle is there until Lilo, Stitch, Gantu, Reuben, and Pleakley arrive on Earth to fight Hamsterville. And Leroy and the army of Leroy's it's going quite well as at first until the Leroys get the upper hand, and it seems like all is lost until Stitch sings a song by Elvis Presley. But it is the second time they used this music, whereas in the previous sequels they got more and more annoying to me. But there is a reason, and that's to destroy the army of Leroy's. So I was alright with it as they go kaboom, including the original Leroy. And afterhand, the Grand Councilwoman is being told by Stitch, Jumbo, and Pleakley they want to go back to Earth, while Gantu comes back to being the captain, and on command, while will be Reuben as the second in command. And back on Earth, Stitch, Jumbo, and Pleakley take a photograph with all the cousins, and Hamsterville is back in prison. And the climax was not great in my opinion, but how was it not great? Let's get to the rating and find out. I'll give this movie a 4.0 out of 10. The movie feels familiar, but not in a good way, as the characters are pretty not great, as Lilo is depressed for most of the movie. Gantu has a dumb arc to begin with after the original movie, while the lines are problematic and the animation is like a typical video sequel, as it doesn't look good. Leroy is a preposterous villain, while the fight between Leroy and Stitch wasn't very good either, as this is harmless for kids, but unfortunately, it's not good for me. And like I said previously, Gantu is betrayed by how he was in the first movie by making him good at the end, as the writing in this is too obvious for my taste. The acting is pretty bad, while Gantu turning to the good side felt like a total cliche, and this has problems as it hopefully might be the worst in the series, and luckily they played Elvis music a couple of times in this movie, so it wasn't as obnoxious, as it is a mild non-recommendation for this movie, as this is probably going to be hopefully the worst in the series, despite the live-action movies next which isn't out yet until this Thursday, but we'll see how that goes. But at the end of the day, it's not a great movie in my opinion. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be back with the live-action Lilo and Stitch. And until then, bye-bye!